it's time to start a new quilt. So I've pulled some fabrics. I have a Marimekko and 3 African batiks, one of which is overdyed. And so I'm going to cut them into big wide strips and lay them out and see what develops. I have a nice array of pieces here. I think I'll sew them together, and I'll make about 3 of these. Of course, I'll sew them with curved seams. I'll show you how to do that. To make a curved seam, take your 2 pieces, both right side up, and overlap them about 1/2 inch to 1 inch. Then take your rotary cutter and cut a nice gentle curve freehand through both pieces along the overlap. Remove the scraps, and here you have it, a nice curved edge. Now we'll sew them. I cut my pieces right side up. Now I'm going to flip the right over the left and align my 1/4 inch seam in such a way that the needle will go through both pieces of fabric on the first stitch. I take a few stitches. Now I change my hand position so that the top fabric is in my left hand and the bottom fabric is in my right hand. I'll feed the fabric through the machine in such a way that those 2 edges stay together all the way through, regardless of the curves. I have to shift back and forth a little bit to keep those edges aligned. There we are. A nice piece seam. Now we'll press it. Well, here's a start. Now I have to figure out what I'm going to do with them. I'm looking for ideas. All right, I'm ready to start cutting fabric and committing to some sort of design. I'm starting to cook now. There, now I'll have to sew it all together. This quilt needs a focal point, so I'm looking for some accent fabrics. Well, here's one possible design. I've made it with 25 elements, so it will qualify for the local Quilt Guild's 25th anniversary show challenge, which is called 25. Here it is with fabric. I've used a low contrast fabric because this is to be a lap quilt, not a big pizzazzy wall quilt. Now I'm about to machine applique them onto the top. I've cut out my little motifs and attached fusible web to the back of them, turned the seam allowance under and fused that down, and now I fused the whole motif onto the quilt top. I'm going to sew around the motif with a decorative stitch from my machine that makes little loop-de-loops with heavy hand-dyed thread. I'm just catching the edge of the motif. I've sewn around all 25 of my patches, and they look pretty sharp. I've taken my leftover fabric and put together a back for this quilt. Basting is the next step. I have starched and ironed both the top and the back so they're absolutely flat. And I've taken a piece of wool batting and steamed it with holding my steam iron over it, not touching it, and that has relaxed it and made it nice and fluffy. Now I'm basting it. I've secured it with a few pins, and now I'm going to baste it with some nice inexpensive thread that's rather soft so that it will grip the fabric. And I will baste it in sections about 2 by 2 feet and then go on to the next section. we go. I'm finishing this quilt with free motion machine quilting. I've already quilted the little 25 motifs, and now I'm filling in all the spaces with rather free-form feathers. I'm making them large so that this lap quilt will be nice and poofy. I don't want to flatten it. So I've sewn a stem, and now I'm just going around along that stem and making nice, smooth, big feathers. Well, my quilt is complete. I've finished quilting it. I've added a binding made of scraps of fabric. I made it extra fat and added extra batting in there so it's nice and poofy. I made and sewed on a nice label. I photographed it, logged it into my records, and it's ready to use. It's a nice, cozy lap quilt.